Calm, focus, happiness.
Welcome to Mindfulness Mode. It's Bruce Langford here again, and thanks for joining us. We're here to talk about quite a few different topics, but autism is going to be the center of it. My guest has written a book about autism well-being, and that's exactly what it's called, Autism Wellbeing Plan, How to Get Your Child Healthy. And it's a comprehensive resource for parents to understand the most common health problems that autistic children suffer from and how to address them. So if you've listened to the show for a while, you know that this is a particular interest of mine. And I'm really interested to talk to Christian because his book really is comprehensive, well written. If you get your hands on this book, I think you're going to agree with me that it just covers all the bases. It's really, really excellent. So I'm here today with Christian Yordanov. Christian, are you in mindfulness mode today?
I am indeed, Bruce. Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be on with you, my friend.
Yeah, good to meet you. Good to have you here. I'm really excited about talking about this book because, wow, you really do cover a lot in this book. And you can tell right away when you start reading the book what your level of expertise is like. What brought you to the point of talking about this particular topic of autism and children? I know that your whole area in life is all about health and well-being, but for our listeners, tell us how you arrived at the point that you decided to write this book.
Yeah, I think it is the case for many people that get into autism. It's someone in their family is affected, and that's what happened to me in 2018. A child in my family, a young kid, was basically suspected of being on the spectrum. At the time, I was reading a book by a famous and brilliant man called William Walsh, PhD, Dr. Walsh, as we
Right.
like to call him. And I was reading his book called Nutrient Power, and he's been working with all sorts of populations, from people with autism, uh, depression, schizophrenia, ADHD, and also with violent criminals. So he's done a lot of different lab work over the decades. And in the book, I was reading all the other chapters, except the autism chapter didn't interest me until that moment where I found this out. So I immediately dove into that chapter, and I noticed that a lot of things between different conditions are shared. For example, um, toxic metals, um, low zinc, high copper, and a few other things. So I was very fascinated. I suspected it's another one of those things where we're told it's genetic, but it's far from when you actually do a deep dive into it. So I followed the references to the scientific papers in the back of the book, and that uh, some listeners might know, if you read one scientific paper, there's usually 100 to 300 references in the back of that. So it turns into a massive rabbit hole. So hundreds and hundreds of studies later, um, in 2020, March 2020, is when I published the book. And the reason I decided to write and publish the book is I was trying to help more people out. I joined some Facebook groups with the information I had found whilst I was helping my family members. And I was very quickly met with a lot of disdain. And this is something I found out later, that there's a lot of, I suppose, stigma. There's a lot of unproductive emotions with parents that have autistic kids. And it's actually very difficult. It was very difficult for me to get through to them. I was, again, like I said, met with a lot of disdain. And I said to myself then, and to my then girlfriend, now wife, I told her nobody will take me seriously regarding this stuff unless I write a book. And I said, I've always, since the age of maybe 10 years old, I knew I was going to write a book one day. I was proclaiming it when in my 20s, even though we were, just lousy, good for nothing, no good doers. But I was still messing with my friends and saying
That's
that,
pretty harsh.
yeah, wasted a lot of time in my 20s. But I was always kind of here and there. I would joke, I'm gonna write a book one day, you guys will see. And then they would laugh at me. Yeah, who's gonna read your silly little book, dude? But anyway, so I wrote the book with the idea that nobody's helping a lot of these parents. They're going to the doctor, first thing with their small child, and the doctors just clip their wings. They say there is no cure, it's for life, it's genetic, nothing you can do. And most parents are, that's them done. Most of them won't even do any extra, or many of them won't do a lot of much extra research. And the fact is, as my book outlines, as you can see, there's a lot that parents can do, and the earlier they start, the better. And it's all a matter of educating these folks. So that's what I set out to help with my book and my work.
Well, I have so many questions to ask you, but first, tell us about mindfulness and what that means to you, because I know that that's important when it comes to raising children and when it comes to raising autistic children, for sure.
So I think to me, I'm a dad as well now. So when I wrote the book, I didn't have a kid, so I
Yeah.
felt like some of the recommendations in the book, they were a little bit, how do I say, neutral. I wasn't giving personal advice. I was giving what I know from other parents and kind of families I've spoken to and worked with. So now that I'm a dad, for me, just to answer your question, my mindfulness is very simply being aware. So you're aware. You're not in a sort of like a dreams, half daydreaming, thinking about, like, for example, today we were out with my daughter in the morning to get some sun, because now the days are shorter. We went to see some donkeys nearby and some geese and chickens that a neighbor has. And my daughter and my dog, these two creatures, amazing creatures, they're really what kind of keeps me in this mindfulness state. When I lapse, I notice I'm thinking about something and my daughter's doing something really cute, or with a dog or on her own, and that is what wakes me up and says, be present, be here, observe the surroundings, don't be in your head. Because I just started writing in my next book, so it's like I find myself, I'm in a family situation, let's say dinner, and I'm thinking about this chapter. Where would this topic go? Where do I crowbar this concept into the book? So I'm noticing I'm not mindful, and I am usually good about that. And it's just a matter of catch up with the breath. Just remember where the breath is, remember where you are, feel the body, and then be here, be present. So that's what mindfulness is for me in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, so Mindful Tribe, you know that I'm a dad, and you know that my son is 22. You probably know that as well, and that when he was about 5, he was diagnosed with autism. And so he's very high functioning and has done really well in a lot of ways. But thinking back, it was really tough as a parent, because I think we felt very alone, and we did a lot of reading, but as far as trying to find like anyone to actually help us or anyone who actually knew, it just felt like we were pretty alone out there. And then the other thing is that sometimes you would read things and it would give you the impression that, well, that there was something wrong with your child. And I love what you do, Christian. You talk right away about your child is not broken. Your child is perfectly the way they're supposed to be. They're not broken. And that's basically our philosophy, is that we just wanted to be as loving and just as open and just be the best parents we possibly could, and be accepting of who he was, and really encourage him to be who he was. So that's kind of where we started, and that's how I feel that you started your book.
Yeah.
Is that, you went with that idea, your child is not broken, right?
Yeah, but like this is something again that I noticed in those Facebook communities that I joined. Is
Yeah.
a parent would come in, new parent, and they would be like, what about the gluten-free, casein-free diet for autism? And then people would start almost shaming them, that this person that's coming to look for help, they're starting to get shamed into, like, I remember some comment was, you should accept the child that God gave you and not try to fix your child and things like that. And even some people close to me that have autistic kids, that I try to help out with lab testing and supplements and stuff, at one point they would lose interest, and I was like, well, why? We're making good progress. Why not continue? And it's like, I just feel like I'm trying to fix my child and stuff, and I can almost guarantee that is the influence of probably some other people that just they just don't believe that any of that stuff is relevant, or it's gonna work, or it's gonna have any positive impact. So absolutely, that our kids are who they are, and when your kid when something is, as a parent, something is not right with your kid's health, it doesn't mean that trying to resolve that issue or figure out what's the problem there, it doesn't mean that you're not accepting your child for who you are. It's not like we're trying to change the character of the child. We're not trying to change their personality. They can be still have their quirks and all these other things. But if you take, like I say, I think in the book I said that, I can't remember, on my website, if you take your child to the doctor and your child is like really sick, like clearly is like a bacterial infection, and the doctor gives you an antibiotic, would you go home and then, before you give your child the antibiotic, it's like, honey, to your spouse, honey, you know what? I don't think we should give our kid this antibiotic. What, are we trying to fix our kid? We're not accepting the situation God gave us. How doesn't that just sound ridiculous?
It does.
It sounds preposterous.
It does sound completely ridiculous.
Exactly. So it's the same with, if you go to the doctor and they do some lab work and your child has an iron deficiency, but for some reason, when we talk about so this is based on the research into autism, right? When we talk about things like a lot of these kids with autism, the populations that they have tested, a lot of them have gut dysbiosis, gut problems, nutrient deficiencies. They have toxic metals, toxic chemicals, sometimes mold toxicity. So we have the research that shows that these kids have something, but it's not something that you just go to your doctor and they know to check for. So for whatever reason, these things don't looking for these things and trying to resolve these things somehow turned into trying to fix our kids, whereas the things that the regular doctor can help with, they're just standard routine. So this has been kind of a little bit of a point of frustration to me, and I always try to when I'm communicating with parents, is like, we're not trying to fix things. We're trying to remove impediments to your child's ability to fully thrive. Once you figure out what things are impeding your child's development and remove those, they will naturally start to reach for their genetic potential. I'll give you one quick case in point, Bruce. So there was a study. They gave some autistic kids, actually I can't remember the ages of them. Maybe they were they weren't like kids like in their 4 to 6, 8. Maybe they were a bit older. But they gave them an antibiotic. I forget that, was it metronidazole or vancomycin? They gave them an antibiotic, and they had an improvement in autistic symptoms based on whatever checklists or rating scale. So they had an improvement in the autistic symptoms after this antibiotic, but that improvement was temporary. So that particular antibiotic works really well for certain Clostridia bacteria species that leave behind spores. So my sort of take on this is, they killed a bunch of Clostridia bacteria in the guts of those kids that were contributing to the whole picture of autism. After some weeks, those spores, quote unquote, hatched, and a new life cycle began, and they started exuding those harmful chemicals that they do, and then the symptoms returned. So my question to anyone that sort of doubts or sort of says it's all genetic is, if it's genetic, if those kids want to be that way, why do their whole behavior, does the whole behavior change after an antibiotic? Surely an antibiotic should not change your behavior unless that behavior was in some way, shape, or form affected by the microorganisms in the gut and the toxins they produce. So that's one study that I really think kind of shatters this idea that it's all genetic.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk specifically about gut health. I know that you've already touched on it. Why do you think that seems to be such a big problem?
So many reasons. I think one reason is a lot of, and we're talking now specifically for autism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one reason is a lot of kids, moms have some type of immune system, let's say either irregularities or activation during the pregnancy. So some, for example, they've done research where if the mother has an autoimmune issue like Hashimoto's thyroiditis or type 1 diabetes, there's a higher incidence of autism then in the children. Also, we have things like if you get a bacterial infection or some type of virus or whatever, these things cause an immune response, right? And the thing is, excuse me, when a woman is pregnant, the immune system can be dampened because you don't want the immune system to attack the fetus because it's technically a foreign thing in the body. So the immune system is dampened in many ways. So if you add something that creates an aberration, we create a bunch of immune cells that then can cross the placental barrier, and they can change the developing immune system. They can cause some type of dysregulation. So immune system dysregulation of some sort is very common in autism, and the fact that the immune system is tightly linked to the gut. So we think about it this way: you have the gut, and something like 60 to 70% of all of the body's immune cells are kind of in and around the gut area, right? So if you have a disturbed immune system to begin with for whatever reason, be it from antibiotics, some medications, toxins in the environment, your mother had some type of immune activation, then your immune system may be somewhat dysregulated. That will affect the gut. That means that foods that would normally not be a problem can become what is known as antigenic. That can lead to inflammation, that can lead to intestinal permeability or leaky gut, that can cause further issues with the foods coming in, becoming immunogenic or sort of activating the immune system. And this can cause a vicious circle or vicious cycle where more inflammation, more immune activation can occur, and that actually creates a ripe environment, first of all, for existing bacteria or not necessarily pathogenic, but bacteria in the gut that are not good in great amounts or in great numbers. If they start proliferating, that can cause more sort of dysbiosis. You can also, if your immune system is somewhat perturbed, you can get it's more easy to get an infection, and that again, it can cause a whole vicious cycle of things that further exacerbate this whole thing. And then the other piece of the puzzle with autism especially is, so I just said the gut and the immune system are very tightly linked, but another thing that is coming more and more into the limelight now is the fact that the gut is actually a part of the nervous system. So you have a lot of nervous tissue in the gut area, and there's they call it the gut brain axis. So the two communicate. It's not just the brain sending signals and controlling functions in the body. There are certain things that signal back to the brain. So the gut and the brain and the microbiota, the intestinal bacteria and other organisms, they affect that axis, and that can cause neurological effects, right? So a lot of people, and this is outside of the scope of autism, but a lot of people with a disturbed gut can have only solely neurological symptoms. I'm talking sleep problems, depression, headaches, things like that can be caused by a gut problem, and their gut function may seem completely normal, no diarrhea, no constipation, no gas, flatulence, bloating, and it's all caused by the gut, but it only manifests as, like, again, neurological things, headaches, depression, mood issues. So in autism, that's really probably the centerpiece of the whole equation, is this sort of this, I guarantee you, or I'm willing to bet, let's say $1,000, if you give me any amount of autistic children, be it 100, 1,000, 10,000, a million, I'm willing to bet on each one of those children blindly $1,000 that they will have a gut problem of some kind that we can investigate with a stool test. And I will lose some of those bets, but in the aggregate, I'm thinking 97% of those bets I will probably win. That is how important and big this issue is.
Yeah, that's quite a statement. Let's talk about minerals. Why is it that so many minerals seem to be out of balance when it comes to autistic children?
Well, one of the biggest reasons is we're actually not eating a lot of minerals nowadays as a society. One big reason for that, first of all, is the fact that a lot of the products that we eat have been stripped of the minerals. So if you look at all the things with flour, white breads, pasta, which are a huge staple, these are, bereft of much nutrition. They're fortified with things like zinc oxide, iron oxide, some B vitamins, but generally these are very low quality, poor or low bioavailability substitutions. Then the other thing is all the farming and the over farming of the agricultural land. When a plant grows, it uptakes a bunch of the minerals in the soil.
Okay.
And then, we eat that, we poop that out, and instead of reapplying that back to the soil like we used to, that probably goes into the ocean, and it's harmful in whatever way, form it goes there. It's harmful there, and it leaves the soil bereft of nutrients over time. And sure, 1 to 10 years, not a big issue, but we've been farming in this way for something like 120 years at this point, 110 years. And usually farmers just reapply back NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And, more organic, regenerative farmers, they're a little bit smarter and they use manures and stuff like that. But for the most part, industrially processed food, which is what most of the population now, it seems, are eating, it's a big issue. And what that causes, let's say you're eating a diet very low in zinc and magnesium and calcium and selenium, the fact that you're getting less of these minerals means, obviously, first of all, that your body is not working at optimal, but it also allows more of the toxic metals to be absorbed. So if you are very low in zinc, or your diet is low in zinc, the body will take up more cadmium, which is very hard and very toxic, and it can lead to arterial stiffness, high blood pressure in autistic kids. I think they've done, I can't remember, was it in autistic kids, but they've done studies where I think in ADHD it's very common. So lead, was it lead, cadmium, mercury, aluminum, and arsenic. These are like the five most prevalent metals. And certain, again, so calcium, if your diet is low in calcium, you literally will uptake more lead in the bones, and it gets stored in the bones, and it gets slowly secreted into the blood over time, because bone has a turnover, it's a living tissue. So the biggest defense vector for the toxic metals from the diet is ensuring we are supplying minerals in our diet. And nowadays, it's unfortunate to say, but the best source is supplemental, unless you eat liver regularly, like I do, my family does every couple of days, and sometimes every day when we need more support, like when we have a cold or something like that. Unless you do that, or take some minerals as a supplement, I think most people are at a very suboptimal for them intake, and over time that is just really going to show manifest more and more as dysfunction and eventually some type of symptom or condition.
Right. I know you live in Portugal, Christian. I've heard that it's a lot easier to get some of these minerals and to eat healthy in European countries than it is in North America. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so, because most of my clients are actually in the USA, and I can see what some of them track diet in our client management app, so I can see what they're eating on a regular basis and what and I don't mean this in any sort of negative way, it's just the way things are. What constitutes a healthy diet in the USA, in Europe, in many places, it would be considered a very unhealthy diet.
Mm-hmm.
And so and what is considered a healthy diet in Europe, I personally consider a very unhealthy diet, right? So there's it's a big spectrum. Luckily, when people start working with me, we can definitely start teasing out all the things that are really hurting the diet. But yeah, the general population in the USA have been royally screwed over by big agriculture, big pharma, all the big industry, right? Because if you look at, just as an example, if you look at baby formula in Europe, it's horrendous. We're talking sunflower oil, a bunch of different omega-6 oils, just disgusting things. But if you look at that baby formula in the USA, it's beyond disgusting. That should be criminal that they're selling this stuff. We're talking high fructose corn syrup, soybean oil. So for whatever reason, the American public are really getting the short end of the stick. Soybean oil in everything, GMOs, food colorings and everything, just the seed oils, the vegetable oils as they're also known, the fact that they're so prevalent, that alone is probably the biggest driver of heart disease, cancer, and all the other diseases in between.
Right. And even between US and Canada, I know that like there are all kinds of products that they look like the same product on the label, but then when you read the ingredients, you find out the products that are sold in the US have corn syrup in them, and the ones that are in Canada do not. And there are some of those differences that is surprising because we're all in North America over here, but there's a lot of differences between some of the foods that are sold in Canada compared to the US.
Yeah, and another thing that's actually very scary is, I was reading some research for my next book today, and if you we know that obesity is a big problem in the Western world, but it's particularly bad in particularly worse in the USA. But what happens is when you have a lot of fatty stores, fatty tissue, that is a storage site for a lot of toxins like persistent organic pollutants. So a lot of these things have been taken off the market for decades, but they're so persistent in the environment and they're so lipophilic, so they have an affinity for fatty tissue, is that what I'm trying to say here, excuse me, so a lot of these folks that are overweight and obese, they have stored up a lot of these toxins in their body, and some speculate that maybe that's a defense mechanism. Maybe the body is not allowing them to release that fat, or it's accumulating more so that it becomes a repository or a storage depot for these toxins, so that they don't circulate in other places where there's fats like the brain, organs, and they don't cause serious damage, right? So to tie it back to the food thing is, a lot of especially non-organically produced animal products can actually be a big source of these persistent organic pollutants. So they kind of, because they're so, again, persistent, they kind of bioaccumulate up the food chain. So for example, we know fatty fish, they will have that in their fats. Animal products like milk, the fat on beef, on cattle, right, is going to be accumulating these things. So another way I see that the American public especially have been really done in is the fact that they're consuming a lot of these persistent organic pollutants in the diet. So now, like if I was living in the States, I would have to be, I would be probably diagnosed with orthorexia nervosa. That is how pedantic I would become about sourcing my food. I certainly wouldn't go into like a regular store and just get some milk or some cheese or some meat or things like that. I would be looking for farmers, probably in very kind of far away places that possibly deliver, where I know that they know the land and what's been done with that land, because you can have a lot of, let's say, um, uh, pesticide applications or other chemicals being used on a piece of land, and then maybe 10 years later, you might have someone turn it into an organically certified farm, thinking now you're getting good food, but you could be getting a lot of the contaminants from the soil for a very
that
long
lasts
time.
for years.
For years, sometimes decades, and in the body as well, they can last decades. So you have nowadays, you have to really, this has to be, if you value your life and your health and your family's life and health, this has to be a person's number one priority if they want to not just survive but thrive in the modern world.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, as well as health and nutrition, you're also a breathing instructor. Buteyko, is that how you say that? Buteyko breathing instructor. Buteyko. Yeah,
Buteyko.
Tell us about that and how breathing can really help autistic children.
Yeah, so I learned Buteyko. Basically, the breathing method Buteyko is named after Dr. Konstantin Buteyko, and I learned it from someone in Ireland called Patrick McKeown, who is a foremost world authority on breathing, and he learned the method directly from Dr. Buteyko. I think he was Ukrainian, I believe, or Russian, one of the two. I always forget. But basically, what he noticed, what Dr. Buteyko noticed back in, I think it was the 80s, is that his patients, or the closer somebody was to dying, the more shallowly they would breathe. And Patrick McKeown and his Buteyko method, they basically teaches that in today's society, chronic hyperventilation, or to just say it more easily, over breathing, is very prevalent. So a lot of us, we breathe too much, so too large a volume of air in per minute, right? So the method is all about using simple breath hold exercises in order to teach the body to breathe a smaller amount of air. So it's about slowing down the breath, and then not really, so if I can show, not really expanding the belly too much when you breathe. It should be so slow and quiet that it should be almost imperceptible, right? The breathing. And it actually, children learn it very fast now. With autistic kids, I haven't really used this with my clients much, because I've just been focusing on the other stuff with the lab testing and the nutrition, the diet. But just with kids in general, or adults in general, what we find is when they retrain themselves to breathe a little bit less, and to breathe through the nose at all times, which is another thing that this modern society has kind of created, is we seem to sigh. People sigh. It's a way to like let go of some tension. We yawn, and we just kind of, some people would like every few minutes will go, have you noticed that?
Yes,
So
I have.
yeah, so what that does actually, as benign as it looks and seems, when you breathe too much, or you breathe through the mouth as well, you're actually expelling a lot more carbon dioxide than you want to. And what that does is it changes the pH of the blood. And when that happens, it can actually be harder for the oxygen in the hemoglobin in the blood to get released to the cells. So even if you breathe a lot and very fast, you are actually getting less well oxygenated. So it's kind of paradoxical, But if you actually breathe slowly through the nose, in and out, but I'm talking maybe a cadence of 10 to 12 breaths per minute, which is actually a little bit less than most people breathe. I think now some people can breathe up to 20 breaths per minute. 14, 15 is kind of a fairly normal amount. So it's about slowing the breathing down. And then you notice anxiety. Things like anxiety, ADHD improve a lot, right? In fact, there was a study I cited in my book. Children at 3 age with sleep disordered breathing had a higher need for special education needs, or had a higher special education need by the age
Right.
of 8, right? So
Wow.
breathing re-education is one of those things where it's not super sexy, but it's like mindfulness, you know,
Yeah.
or meditation. Excuse me, one second. It's like mindfulness or meditation. It's a very subtle little thing, just maybe watching the breath or just kind of calming down, putting your attention on the inside. So what we find with breathing and re-education in this way, and these simple little breath hold exercises, you actually become calmer. So he's got Patrick McKeown has written something like 11 or 12 books, and one of them is all about using the method for anxiety. He has one for sleeping better, one for asthma. So there's just a myriad of applications for improving the breath, from improving pregnancy sort of comfort and outcomes to, like I said already, anxiety, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, just really all of the conditions that you can think of can be improved just by improving the breathing patterns.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And really interesting too that a lot of people think they're doing really great things with the way they're breathing, but in fact, a lot of us are doing it wrong. So I'm really glad we were able to touch on that.
And you know, sorry,
Yeah,
Bruce.
go ahead.
Actually, back in 28, I think it was 2018 when I studied breathing with him, the first thing that caught me is he said, well, when you go to yoga class, what does the yoga teacher say? Take a nice deep breath and then
Yeah,
breathe out through the mouth.
that's right.
And I kind of sometimes tell people, here's an experiment you could do. Breathe in through the mouth 20 times. Go. And 5, 10 breaths in, you notice if you touch your kind of your neck area, your carotid artery, you can see how quickly your pulse has started to raise. And what you're doing is, by breathing in and out through the mouth, you're actually activating the sympathetic or the fight or flight nervous system. And on the other hand, if you do it through the nose slowly, you can see how you're calming down. If you're monitoring your vitals, you would see your pulse is lowering, your blood pressure is lowering, a bunch of things are lowering, you know. So it's kind of interesting that you go to these sort of places that are about relaxation, and a lot of yoga instructors don't know the very thing that yoga is all about. It's about the breath in these various positions, which is why actually I'm glad that a few days ago I noticed this Patrick McKeown character I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Him and one of his students just published a 700-page book that's all about breathing for yoga. So they're going to be re-educating a lot of instructors, hopefully, and going to be making some positive changes on that front.
Well, wow, that's some intense book. And your book is not anywhere close to that length. So I want to make sure that my listeners understand that your book is very digestible. You know, it's not too long, it's not too complicated. It's very easy to read and understand and get to the end of it. And you can scan through the index and see so many different topics related to the health of your child. And you can jump toward those topics if you want to, but it's a very easy read. Now, I know I mentioned to you that we'd be talking briefly about the topic of bullying. Do you have a short story you can share with us about bullying and how it relates to mindfulness?
Well, I had a lot of run-ins with bullying in school, because when I was 9, my family moved from Bulgaria to South Africa, and I was kind of the odd kid out. I couldn't speak English. I was
Right.
different. So there was a lot of run-ins with bullying, and honestly, the lesson I learned there is you have to stand up to the bully. And I've I'm not saying I'm proud of it, but I was in a lot of fights when I was a kid, and I would jump like multiple kids because they just pushed me over the edge. And then the crazy part is that when I went back to Bulgaria six years later, again I was the different person. So again there was bullying, there was a lot of this stuff. When it comes, so I've definitely experienced bullying myself, and obviously not, I'm not proud to say that it I actually have also bullied children as a, it's kind of probably a way to reclaim the strength, and it's not a very healthy way of doing it. And obviously nowadays I don't feel like that is the right way to deal with it personally. But I believe we really have to teach, at least with the way I'm going to operate with my child, is I really think we have to teach ourselves or our children, whoever the person in question is, that we have to stand up to the bully. That takes presence of mind. If you get into sort of a like a learned helplessness mode, that means you weren't as mindful as you could be, and that means you just kind of go into defensive mode, you hide into your shell, and that can actually that can actually not work out very well for you, because it can cause people to go towards addictive things, hurting themselves in some way. So we have to stand up to the bully, and for to do that we have to be mindful. That's why we have to teach, at least again, it's my view, my opinion, I'm going to teach my child that these things are not acceptable from an early age, and if something like that happens, you have to stand your ground and do something about it, and never cower. And it's okay to talk about it. Now, in terms of mindfulness, God, I'll tell you, I'm not really, I don't consider myself in any way, shape, or form an expert on this, but I would say that probably we have to have the presence of mind to understand that the people bullying are very, very hurt people.
Yes.
And this, we have to perhaps come from a place of empathy, so we don't see them as an enemy, but we see them as like the saying goes, hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
It's not, I wouldn't even consider it personal, right? So if you can depersonalize it, you can take away some of the pain on you, like or the victimhood that can actually warp a lot of future relationships. So if we can have the presence of mind to understand it's not personal, don't take it personally, but definitely try to extract yourself out of the situation and not allow the person to think that they can continue to perpetuate this behavior.
Yeah, that's great advice. I 100% agree with that. And as we move forward in the interview, I'm just want to ask you 5 quick answer questions. So just
Sure.
30-second answers are perfect. The first one is this: who's one person who has been a very powerful mindfulness influence in your life?
Actually, I'll have to say Patrick McKeown again, because
Mhm.
doing all the breathing stuff that was part of me becoming a Buteyko practitioner. I remember when we were in his house in near his clinic in Ireland, in kind of the west of Ireland. It was almost a spiritual experience to be so connected to the breath, and to be studying the breath, and to actually understand the breath, and seeing how calm he is and how healthy he is. He's in his 50s now. And all he does is the breath, and just the basic things about lifestyle and diet. No crazy biohacking and stuff. So he's been a really great influence on me, and the fact that he can churn out a book every year for the last 10, 11 years is phenomenal.
That is phenomenal. My next question is about emotions. Tell us how mindfulness has helped you deal with your emotions in a better way.
Yes, my emotions. I think the older I get, the more I'm able to breathe in and think about what someone said or what has occurred before reacting. When I was younger, I was much more impulsive, and I guess the older I get, just the more I kind of stop for a second, and then instead of having to like reply or say something immediately, I can extract myself from the situation, and either tomorrow or a couple of hours later I can respond or kind of come in with a decision. So I think I to be honest, I think it's just a matter of the process of mastering your emotions is a journey, not a destination. And I guess it's one of those things that you learn more as you become more mature.
Right. My next question is always about breathing, but we've really covered this. And I want to just move on to the next question, which is about a book. You've mentioned a couple of books. Are there any books besides yours? And I'll mention the name of yours again, Autism Wellbeing Plan, How to Get Your Child Healthy. So any other books that you would recommend?
Actually, there's a lot of books, to be honest, I can recommend, but I actually really like Robert Greene.
Uh-huh.
He has written a number of books, The 48 Laws of Power, The Laws of Human Nature, Mastery, 33 Strategies of War. So those, I have all of those, and I have basically, I think I have all of his books and most of them in audiobook format as well. And he's a great he understands psychology, and all of his books, they have a lot of historical figures,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of psychology. For example, The Laws of Human Nature, that would be kind of my favorite one at the moment. It really kind of helps you understand the human condition, so that you are able to better, I suppose, live better in society. But it also, there's a lot of really interesting anecdotes from history, from leaders,
Mm-hmm.
politicians, artists. So it's a fascinating read and a very interesting listen on Audible.
Oh, I'm going to check that out because I have not read anything by Robert Greene.
You
So
will love it.
yeah, I thank
And
you for that recommendation.
he has such a simple writing style,
Mm,
but it's just so easy to read, and you almost feel like you're getting a history and a psychology lesson at the same time.
cool. That's great. And excuse me, my last question is about an app. You've mentioned an app. I heard you mention that near the beginning of the program. What app would you recommend that can help with mindfulness or with just living in general?
I'm gonna throw a curveball at you here, Bruce. I recommend leaving your phone at home and getting the
Yeah.
heck out of your house
Yeah.
in the sunshine. If
Yeah.
you can expose a bunch of skin to the sunshine, bring your pet or your child. Leave your earphones at home, leave your phone at home, and be outside. Listen to the birds sing, listen to the wind howl, and look at some insects doing their thing, some ants, some bees, whatever, and just interact with the natural world, because that is probably one of the best biohacks one can do in today's world.
That is a really, really good piece of advice. I totally agree. Well, Christian, it has been fantastic talking to you, and I really appreciate the book you've written. And before we wrap it up, do you have any final words of advice? Actually, what you just said sounds like a final word of advice, but maybe you have another couple of things you can mention.
I'll just reiterate, get guys, gals, everybody, get the seed oils and their remnants out of the diet. This is beyond cholesterol, saturated fat, sugar. All of those things are nothing in comparison to the detrimental effects we're getting from the seed oils and everything around us. So everything with omega-6s, I honestly believe even nuts, seeds, anything that has omega-6 doesn't belong in appreciable quantities in the human diet, right? So if you can get those things out of your diet as soon as possible and get some full spectrum vitamin E to protect the the ones that are already in your body, because if you don't protect them, they will oxidize and inflame you and deplete you of antioxidants and cause damage and give you fatigue and potentially even cause some type of condition down the line. So remove them out of your diet, get some full spectrum vitamin E, and take it every day for a few years while this stuff kind of gets out of your system. This
Mm.
is the best gift you can give to yourself and your health for the long term.
Yeah, I totally agree about seed oils. Get them out of your kitchen, get them out of your life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Christian, thank you so much for being a guest on Mindfulness Mode today.
Bruce, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Bye now.